morning, Lionhearts. Your old pal Jordan the Lion. How are you doing today? Great! I am too, because today is my birthday. Today is July 30th. It is my 38th birthday, and I was thinking to myself, what should I do for my birthday vlog? What would I like to do? And I thought, you know what? I know exactly what I would like to do. Fresh on the heels of getting this wristwatch, the 68 Comeback Special wristwatch, I decided today I'm going to talk about the 68 Comeback Special. How it came about, how it is now known for one thing, and it was actually originally meant to be something completely different. It was not meant to be Elvis's comeback. This was meant to be Elvis's Christmas special that they attached to a contract so that he could get funding to make a movie. So we'll talk about that today. Daze with Jordan the Lion begins now. And the first thing I want to do for my birthday is take that guy out to the park so he can have some fun. What do you say? You want to go to the park? Oh, there's the welcoming committee. So the story of how the 68 Comeback Special started was that Elvis's movie contract was up. His career was not in the greatest stance. He was not really drawing at the box office. He wasn't performing live and he wasn't touring or anything. So the Colonel made a deal with NBC to finance the next movie. However, NBC said Elvis has to do a TV special. So the Colonel agreed. Now, Elvis did not want to do TV. He didn't like TV because his only real positive experience was performing with Frank Sinatra and the Ed Sullivan Show, because he said they always kind of made fun of him whenever he was on TV. They would have him on there to do gags, and that just wasn't what he wanted to do. He wanted to make music. And he didn't really even want to do the films anymore. So at any rate, the Colonel agreed to do this, and the Colonel was bound and determined for this to be a Christmas special. So they set out to make this, and like I said, it wasn't a comeback special because the Colonel got Singer Sewing Machines to finance this. So the official original title was Singer Presents Elvis. Now, the reason that they didn't want to call it the comeback special is because, for one thing, Elvis didn't feel like he was he personally didn't feel like his career was in a lull, or he didn't want to accept it. And also, if you call it a comeback special and it's a flop, then his career is over. So they went to a man named Steve Bender and asked him to direct this special. I personally think that Steve Bender is the key to this entire special. I mean, I guess you could say Bob Finkel was the man that hired him, but Steve really knew how to approach Elvis with ideas, and all of his ideas that he ever came up with and presented to Elvis, Elvis always ended up liking, and they ran with him. So at first, Steve Bender didn't even really want to take on the project. He passed on it, and then a friend of his said, hey, I overheard you talking about doing an Elvis special. He goes, I worked with Elvis, and I think you'd really get along. I think you guys would make some magic together. So he calls back Bob Finkel and says, okay, I'll do it on one condition. I want to meet Elvis first and see if we're compatible. And so they say, okay, we'll call the Colonel, we'll set it up. Well, the Colonel said, no way, you're not meeting Elvis, you have to meet me first. And so Steve Bender and the Colonel make this appointment to meet the next day to talk, and Steve Bender tells this funny story where he says, the Colonel tells me to bring French pastries. I think we're gonna have coffee and pastries. I show up, he takes the pastries, throws them in his briefcase, closes them up, and then we start the meeting. But he goes, regardless, you know, the Colonel tells me that he wants to do a Christmas special, and I'm listening to it and I'm thinking, I don't want to work on this. Nobody is gonna care. This isn't gonna revive any careers. So I went home and never thought, you know, that this would ever progress any further. And then I get a call shortly after saying, hey, you have a meeting with Elvis tomorrow. So the next day they went to MGM and had a meeting with the great Elvis Presley. It's a hot one out here today, that's why all the dogs are kind of hiding. So Elvis shows up for the meeting in good spirits, and he walks in and he basically starts telling Steve that he's like, you know, I don't really know how the music business works anymore. I haven't done it since before I went into the Army. I came out and did movies, and I don't really know what to do now. And he says, but what do you think of my career? And Steve basically says, I think it's in the toilet, and I think you need to do something to change it. And I think I have some ideas of what we can do, but I want to know what you want to do. And Elvis says, I just want to make good records. I just want to make records that I love. And so Steve says, okay, you make a record you love and I'll put pictures to it. And Steve said when he talked to Priscilla years later that Elvis told her that was what sold him, was knowing that it was really all whatever Elvis wanted as far as the music, and they would just create a backdrop to it. But Steve and Elvis agreed in that meeting that they didn't need to do a Christmas special. That was not what they wanted to do, and that wasn't really going to do anything for Elvis's career. And Steve also told Elvis, I think if you want to get to be where you want to be, you got to lose weight. And he said Elvis jumped out of his seat and gave him a big hug because Elvis appreciated somebody actually being honest with him. So the special ended up breaking a lot of new ground. For one thing, it revived Elvis's career. Two, it was the first time that anybody had done a primetime special that had such high ratings. I mean, everybody was watching it, but in addition to that, there were no guest stars. It was all based around Elvis. So Elvis was holding their attention the entire time. And what I loved about it was one of the first times you ever saw anybody on TV performing and getting sweaty and their hair messed up, and you could see that they were throwing some passion into it. And that was actually kind of one of the things they said that the network didn't like about it, was that you could see Elvis sweating and that you could see his hair all tousled up. So that ends up being the deal. Elvis goes into United Western Recorders to start working and recording the album itself. And Steve would start a production after, well, basically Elvis and Priscilla went on a vacation, and when Elvis came back, they were to present him with all their ideas. When he came back and they had the meeting, Elvis loved all the ideas, and in fact, Steve said, when I said, what don't you like? He said, no, I like everything, let's just do it. So one of the apprehensions that Elvis had about making this was that they wanted him to perform with an orchestra, and Elvis was really just used to a background, like a rhythm section. So he basically told them, hey, if I don't like this, I don't want to do this. And Steve said, you know, you're Elvis, you can do this. And so once he started singing with them, once he had went over and met all the orchestra members, everything went off without a hitch. So then they would move everything over during the day to start recording where we're going to go to next. This is where they would rehearse the special, where they would eventually record it. And Steve's idea was to record a big portion of it in somewhat of a in the round, like a boxing ring, where there were no ropes, but it was Elvis right there in the center of attention with fans all around him and the symphonic background in the background. Pretty cool special. There he is. Hello. Now the main goal in this special over everything else was to define Elvis Presley. They wanted to pick songs that told the story of who he was, gave a little insight into his personality, and I think one of the greatest things they did in that special was that they had that sitting with like Scotty and Elvis, where it's kind of like a little jam session, and Elvis is telling little stories because you see his personality, his playfulness and everything, and the people that worked with him on that special said that's really the way he was off camera too. It became a big family, and he was very approachable, very easy to joke with. How you doing over here, buddy? I know it's hot. I saw you over here playing with the puppies, but all the puppies over here are leaving now, aren't they? You about ready to go home? You ready to have your breakfast? Here's Warner Brothers Studios directly in front of us, but that is not where Elvis filmed and rehearsed that special. It was actually just past this. So in June of 1968, the whole production started up over here for what would be called the Singer Presents Elvis. Now they had a pretty good idea of how the show would go. They would basically use everything that Elvis wanted to make on his new record, and they would also, in the middle of this, include all of, you know, his greatest hits and all the songs he was known for. So they would start the show out with Jerry Reed's Guitar Man, which is a great selection, and even Jerry Reed was willing to let them change the lyrics a little bit so that it would fit Elvis's life story a little bit. And it's crazy because when they ask him, he's like, yeah, I'll do it because it's Elvis. And that tended to be a lot of people's answer when they were asked for things, because one of the ideas that Steve Binder had was, he said every day after rehearsal, Elvis would go to his room, like his dressing room, and all of his, like his stand-in, his buddies, anybody from the production that was around would just come in, and Elvis would grab a guitar and he would just start jamming. And if you couldn't play an instrument, or if there was like a tambourine or a box or whatever, and you could keep a rhythm on a box, then anybody was willing or was allowed to participate. So Steve saw that and he said, you know, we gotta record Elvis like this, where he's just being a normal guy and where he's just joking around and everything. And he went to the Colonel, and Colonel's like, no way, absolutely not. You're not taking a camera into his dressing room. But Steve said I was adamant about this, so I just kept hitting him about it every day. And finally, the Colonel goes, okay, I'll tell you what, you can record it on a stage, you can set it up like that on a stage, but I won't promise that it'll make the show, but you can record it. So that's what they did. They went to Elvis and they're like, hey Elvis, we want to catch you in that moment. And Elvis said, well, I really, if I'm gonna do that, I want it to be with my boys, the guys that he started with. He wanted Scotty and DJ, and so they called them and they said absolutely not. They hated the Colonel. The Colonel was the reason that they weren't performing with Elvis anymore, but then both of them in the end said, you know what, for Elvis I'll do it. So Steve got his way, and I think that's one of the coolest parts of the whole special, because they basically open up the show with Guitar Man, and then they go right into this round table, this sitting in this boxing ring, and it's like Scotty Moore, DJ Fontana, Charlie Hodge, you know, it's like 4 or 5 guys sitting there, and they're joking around, and you get to see Elvis's personal side, but they also do some of his hits. They do like That's All Right, which is like the first song he ever did at Sun Records, and it just shows, you know, the lightheartedness. And then they go right into a handful of Elvis's greatest hits, like, you know, Teddy Bear and Hound Dog and Heartbreak Hotel. And then you really get to see a great part of Elvis when he does Love Me Tender, and he starts making up his own lyrics through it and kind of goofing his way through it. And then they get back into the serious stuff where Elvis, you know, like I said, this was really meant to showcase Elvis as a person. And so he mentions in there that, you know, all the music that's out now, the Beatles and everything that's been popular since I quit making music, you know, it all comes back to being about rhythm and blues. And then he goes into a great gospel section. But they needed a way to close this out, because they knew Elvis was a strong performer. If they could get people, you know, in the seats and in there watching it, you know, Elvis would just sell it himself. But they had to have an ending, and the Colonel wanted a Christmas song. Steve didn't want a Christmas song. Elvis didn't want a Christmas song. And then the Colonel started telling everyone that Elvis was going to close it out with a Frankie Lane song. So Steve Bender went to his songwriters and said, we need a song that encompasses who Elvis is. We know him well enough now. We've been around him long enough now. We know who he is. Let's let people see this guy who doesn't see color, this guy who's just a nice guy who's easy to get along with. And so that's where If I Can Dream came from. Now, when they created this song, Earl Brown was the one who got credit and did write the entire song. Even his songwriting partner said, you know, Earl tried to give me part of the credit. I said, no way, this was all you. They started writing a song that would use some of Martin Luther King's quotes, and it would just kind of show Elvis as a man. They played it for Elvis here in Studio One, which is where he was going to tape everything, and he loved the song. So they started working on the arrangement and everything, and then they went over to where we're going to go next, and I'll tell you the story of what happened there. One of the things I love so much about getting these is that whenever you see any of the footage from the rehearsals or anything like that, or the stage performance, he's always wearing these, even during, you know, weeks leading up to the recording of it and everything. Here's our reminder that the new Tarantino movie's out, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So also in June of 1968, behind the walls here is where they would start recording all of the backing tracks and all the tracks that they would use for this. Now, how they were doing it was they were arranging the music here at United Western Recorders, and they were also cutting the tracks that would be blended in with what they did live for the special. Now, the only parts that they wouldn't use recorded tracks on for the special were during the talking and the like live performance pieces and everything. But if it was a number that Elvis was going to be dancing and everything, they would blend his live vocals with this. Now, when they were working on the music for If I Can Dream, that's where the magic happened. See, they were doing a few takes to get the perfect recording, and Elvis was in the studio listening, and they must have done it 6 or 7 times, and the more they did it, the more he was feeling the music. And finally he said, Steve, can I put down my vocal tracks here? And he was kind of apprehensive, because he said then they had already released all of the musicians for the day, and if the performer recorded their vocals over the recorded tracks, you still had to pay the musicians as though they were there. So they said, you know what, let's let him do it if he feels that strongly about it. So Steve said that if they would have had the film rolling inside the studio here, this is what they actually would have used for the finale of the show, because it was so moving. He said that They start doing the song, and Elvis knew that song inside and out by that point. He knew all the lyrics, he was feeling the song, and they said he started the song down on the floor in the fetal position, and as the song built and as the song grew, Elvis himself blossomed and grew to the point of having that big finale ending. So they said, you know, it was a shame that we couldn't record that and that we didn't have a recording of that moment, but he said, I knew if Elvis could do it that well during this recording, that there was no question when we recorded it live that he was going to be stellar. And so that's how they decided to end the show. They said that normally shows like that would end with the star coming out and thanking everybody for coming and sending them all home, but they said in this case they knew they had to end it with a bang. They had to end it with a song that just personified Elvis, and If I Can Dream became that song, and it became a hit. Really cool to look at the outside of this and just know what kind of magic would have went on in there, all the preparations for that show. So they basically had laid out how the entire show would go and how it would close out. They had seen that amazing performance by Elvis inside the recording studio that we just saw. And Steve said, you know, I had two options. I can either re-record Elvis doing it live, or I can dub him lip-syncing it. And he said, I didn't want to do that, not for a live show. So I knew if I just turned Elvis loose that he would be great. And in the end, he was. The 68 Comeback Special was an absolutely monumental special that now, you know, it changed his entire career, but it's 50 years later and people still watch it and are still in awe of his performances. I think it's the best possible way to see Elvis, because you get to see, you know, just him. There's no guest stars, there's no Dolly Partons, there's no, you know, famous people in there helping to sell this show. It's 100% Elvis. And right before they filmed it, the day before, Steve Binder told a funny story that happened here at the gate. Now, one of the big deals that the Colonel made was that the Colonel was very adamant about how important it was to have a great audience there watching Elvis, that he wanted very attractive women, people that were going crazy, and people that loved Elvis's music. So he told them, hey, give me 100% of the tickets and I will make sure that the audience is packed with beautiful women, and he was gonna fly them all in from Memphis and all over the country. So the Colonel said in no uncertain terms that you either give him 100% of the tickets and the budget for the audience, or you handle it yourself. So they gave the Colonel 100% of the tickets and the budget. Now, Steve Binder said the night before we were to tape this, I was leaving the lot and I was driving out of the parking gate, and the security guard at the gate said, hey Steve, do you need any tickets for Elvis's show tomorrow night? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, oh, a bald-headed guy came up here and gave me a stack of tickets and said give them to everybody that comes in and out of the gate. So Steve said, I knew then that we weren't gonna have an audience, so we had to come up with a plan the next day for having an audience in here to watch this special being taped. So where do you go when you need an audience and you're in Burbank? The next place that we're gonna head off to. Check out the mural on the side of the dry cleaner here. Kinda cool. So where do you go to find a bunch of fans to watch Elvis perform when the Colonel lets everyone down? Well, right down the street to Bob's Big Boy. That's right, Steve came here and they walked table to table asking all the families and people dining, would you like to come see Elvis? And they managed to, believe it or not. Wouldn't be that hard to imagine that, you know, even people that were 18, 19 when Elvis was breaking, they'd still be in their 30s, so they were all excited to come, and as you can tell by watching this special, pretty packed house. That's right, from the front of Bob's Big Boy, right down the street, not even a half mile is where NBC Universal was. And to me, I think that the version of Jailhouse Rock that he does during this special is probably my favorite version that he's ever done of that song. I just love the songs that they choose to do with him on the stage by himself in front of the all the fans. But that particular performance, just there's something about it. He really tears it up there. So they had their audience situation taken care of now, and all they had to do was film it. Except right before the performance, Elvis got cold feet. He told Steve, I can't go out there. I don't remember anything that we talked about. I don't remember any of the lyrics. I don't remember any of the songs. I don't remember any of the stories. And Steve said, Elvis, I told you when we started this I would never ask you to do anything that you didn't want to do. except now. I need you to go out there. Even if you just say hello, I need you to go out there and do something. And he said, before I even let him answer, I just turned around and walked out of the room. Elvis went out there and the rest was history. Now this was released on television for the public, even though NBC kind of didn't want to do it because, like I mentioned earlier, things that I thought were cool about it, the fact you can see him sweating and the heart in his performance and his hair's all messed up and everything, that's what they didn't like about it. But they ended up airing it, and in December of 1968, it was extremely well received. Elvis was so happy with the outcome that he told Colonel Parker, I want to go back to touring, I want to go back to performing live. And he ended up getting on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine because of this. The Colonel announced in January that Elvis would be doing a comeback tour, which again, Elvis was not happy with that word because he didn't like at the age of 33 being considered a has-been. So, but in the end, he ended up doing all those Vegas residency shows for a long time, and a lot of people said that was because of Colonel Parker's gambling debts. Colonel and Elvis had a 50-50 split in Elvis's career, so all the money that Elvis made, half of that would go to the Colonel, and the Colonel was a degenerate gambler. In fact, they said one of the great things about producer Bob Finkel for this production, Steve Binder said he was one of the greatest producers you could ever ask for because Colonel was involved in everything. You had to ask his permission for just about everything, every song you wanted to do, everything you wanted to do. And he goes, Bob would keep the Colonel sidetracked while we were trying to work and have him playing poker. And Bob said, I lost a lot of money to the Colonel during that, but in the end they kept him happy, kept him sidetracked, and got to make, in my opinion, the greatest TV special of all time. What would start out as the Singer Presents Elvis would be known through history as the 68 Comeback Special. And this would also mark the first time in probably 10 years that Elvis had made a record that wasn't a soundtrack to one of his movies. He actually got to make a real record again. Now there's no question with the Colonel getting 50% of everything Elvis made that Colonel would be enticed to make Elvis a huge star, and I don't think there's any way you can deny that the Colonel had a huge hand in that, but he also was known for working Elvis extremely hard, and a lot of the Memphis Mafia guys said in the end that Colonel Parker just worked Elvis to death till he was dead. I can tell you've been hard at work, as though I didn't even leave. Did you miss me? Ja, did you miss me on my birthday? Did you miss me? Now we're gonna hang out the rest of the day together. What do you think? I came home and had a few birthday presents from you guys. Thank you. Thank you, Janet Matthews, for the Queen in 3D by Brian May book and the Uber gift card. And the, I believe this is you who sent this, was the new camera lens. I'm gonna try out this wide angle lens for the camera that I'm using now. And thank you, Jay, for the gift card to Amazon. You said that you and your mom watch me and you look forward to my vlogs. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the thought. And what did you get me for my birthday? What did you get me, huh? Your undying love? Your loyalty? I'll take it. I'll take it all. Well, my friends, that is the end of the vlog for today. I'm gonna hang out with my friends the rest of the day and celebrate my birthday. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this was special to you, special to me. I love the 68 Comeback Special, so I wanted to make it a fun day. Wanted to thank a lot of people right now, so bear with me. Thank you, Karen Clark, Nancy Hopple, Allison Hamilton, Jen Marie Steiber, Scott Shannon, Andrew Crook, Donna Gutierrez, Mark Draskovic, and Thomas Kincaid for all becoming Patreons. Thank you all for helping to support this channel. And just to think, this time 3 years ago, I was hemming and hawing about whether I was ever going to start vlogging or not. I was inspired to do it. I didn't know when I was going to start, how I was going to edit, but I remember spending the night in the, what is that, Catalina Island, waking up the next day saying, geez, I wish I would have been a vlogger for this trip. This would have been a great trip. And then a couple weeks later, we were vlogging. Have a great night, everyone, and goodbye.